Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment Questions and Answers edition.
We got some fun questions to answer in a Christmas spirit.
Yes, you've got leftovers to mainline, and so have we.
Matthew Wishart has a question for you, Marina. When a new musical or show plays in the theatre, why is night one not called opening night?
Well, Matthew, yes, but opening night is actually the first official night, and what happens before that is what's called previews. Previews actually weren't allowed for many years. They were only allowed in, I think, 1968, and even then you could do sort of like a couple for charity, and then you had to go first into it and have the critics there. Now, you can be in a rehearsal room as much as you like, as anyone will always tell you. And once you get it on a stage, lots of things might need to change. And that includes the script. It might include songs. And so you want to kind of have the chance to work it out in front of an audience, but before the critics are invited in to feast or pass their judgment or whatever it is. And almost all big things do that. In the old days, as I say, you used to have to do it somewhere else. But you can change a lot. We've talked about Wicked before. When they first did that in San Francisco. And Stephen Schwartz, the guy who wrote the music for all of that, said that doing 3 months between then and when it opened on Broadway was what totally saved the show.
Yes.
Completely reworked lots and lots of it. In Into the Woods, Stephen Sondheim wrote one of the biggest songs in the middle of previews, and they only sort of put it on towards the end, which is Last Midnight. But they can go on way too long. That Spider-Man Into the Dark, I think U2 did the music for that, didn't they? Do you know that had 182 previews before it officially
Come on, guys.
because there were so many problems with it. It was technically incredibly complex. I think it just didn't work. It was a disaster anyway. But it was delayed. And in the end, the critics were like, we're just going to buy tickets and we're going to go in, because they've always had this nice arrangement where we understand we are people of the theatre ourselves, and we understand that you must have a chance to work things out. But of course, like many things, the internet has broken it. And also, by the way, preview tickets used to be much cheaper. Now people think, well, I'm entitled to say what I like about it when I've paid this much. But you do still have the opening night. And I mean, I spoke to a director recently who was like, we're going to be in preview for 4 weeks, which I thought was pretty long. But it can happen. And but opening night is quite stressful because you've got all the sort of friends and family, all the critics, notable guests.
Opening night is also press night, essentially.
Yes.
So they're both the same thing. And yeah, it feels unusual, doesn't it? But if you're making a film, you do a bit of rehearsal, then you film it, then you can edit it. The fascinating thing about a play or a musical is there's so many moving parts. And however much you have sat in a rehearsal room and gone through it, and however much, you've done technical rehearsals on the stage, this is not creative people sort of just wanting their cake and eating it. It is impossible to put a show on immediately and for everything to work. And so it's the same as having a soft launch in a new restaurant, isn't it? Sometimes a restaurant will open in your area and they say, look, we're actually going to be opening in 3 weeks, but we need to test out our kitchens. We need to test out our menus. Would you like to come along and have an incredibly cut price food
it's
and
half price,
past the community? And that's the idea.
I accidentally went to one of those recently.
Did
I thought,
you?
is it already open? And I went in and then it came to the bill and it was half price. We were very excited.
Oh, wow.
I would have ordered differently.
Was it good? Yeah, exactly. Was it good?
It was terrific.
That's
yes.
good. So it's one of those things that is absolutely essential. It's not anyone, it's not like, oh, you should have rehearsed more. It's just you cannot until you are there, until you're actually on there, and sometimes until the theatre is full. And sometimes you hear when audiences are laughing, when they're reacting to things, until you see it. Until the director and the writers are just sitting there in their little box watching the whole thing and watching the audience and hearing what they say coming out. That couple of weeks,
scene changes are not going to take too long. All of those sorts of things.
And then hopefully by press night, you're in a stage where you think, okay, this is the version of the play that we really, really want to show people. Because in the theatre still, those reviews are a huge deal and can make or break plays in a way that they can't make or break TV shows quite so much anymore. So
the trouble with these online reviews is that producers and directors will now tell you it was ruined before it started, and it wasn't right that people posted things when we were in preview, and we were working things out, and a lot of that had changed but the buzz can be created quite easily these days.
But the big reason you'd have previews before opening night is the great thing about TV and film is that thing of we can fix it in post. That's what we can say. We can fix this in post. The one thing you have to say about theatre is you cannot fix it in post, so you have to fix it in pre.
Yeah. Is it true that as an author, if you sign a book in a bookshop, then that means the bookshop can't return that copy should it flop? do some authors charge around bookshops signing as many as they can so that copies can be returned, even if that's not what the bookshop wants.
A signed book is a sold book is a mantra in the book industry. But what that means is actually, the world of signed books is quite heavily regulated. And the different bookshops want signed copies of their books. If you sign books, they sell immediately. So it's almost meaningless that they say a signed book is a sold book, because they're never returning them anyway. If you sign, however many you sign, they will sell those first. People will always buy the signed copies first. And it's just it just works for booksellers, because especially if books are gifted, it's just a little extra something that makes it sort of a better present, or just makes it feel more personal to you. So it's one of those things that right from the beginning of time absolutely works. And if you look at vintage books now, if you've got a signed one, they're worth an absolute fortune. They've always been worth more money. But the key thing is they do sell very well. When you're signing for other countries and things, and so suddenly you're doing 45,000, and you can work out if it takes you 4 seconds to sign a book, times that by 45,000, and see how long that takes you.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. I did 5,000 and I did it in 2 days, and it sent me absolutely mad. Like, I saw someone I knew in the street and thought, I am basically like the Jack Nicholson character in The Shining. I've been writing the same thing, sadly my own name.
But you forget how your signature works sometimes.
But you've sent yourself completely, in the way that when you look at any word, it ceases to mean anything. It's a pure existential crisis that you're doing with every time you put your name down, but deepening slightly with each signature.
Yeah, exactly that. But I do love to do it, and I love it because I love booksellers, and also I just think it's nice. It's a nice thing to have. So I always try and do as many as I could. This year I wasn't able to do quite so many because I was doing all sorts of bits and bobs. But then a few weeks ago, I had a day off, so I said to my publishers, let's sign 3,000 for indies, just the indie bookshops up and down the country, and people who've been using their indie bookshops up to Christmas.
Had a day off for an existential crisis.
It's fine by me. But the indies are always so supportive of authors, and it's a nice thing, because indies have to charge you more money for your book, and it's not because they're con artists to say this all the time. It's because they've got bricks and mortar to look after, so they have to charge more. And if you can give them signed copies, which means people will go directly to them to buy those, then it's a really, really great thing to do. So it's one of those things that seems to work for everyone. If you were to go into a bookshop and sign your own books, I guess it would be okay. Most books would not have 400 copies in their local Waterstone. So, most people, you wouldn't walk in and just sign 400 copies, which then they couldn't get rid of. I think if you're a local author and you want to sign books in a bookshop, people are absolutely delighted. And it will mean that, those books will be displayed the front and center. So, I don't think it's a thing that can be abused particularly. You're absolutely right, Sam, that, a signed book cannot be returned. So if you've got, the Boris Johnson books, which were hugely over-ordered by bookstores before Christmas, there are piles of those which will be returned to the publisher after Christmas. And essentially the publisher will lose money on all of those. The bookstore won't lose a penny. If they had been signed, they wouldn't be able to be returned. But the truth is, the signed ones would have been the first ones to have sold. It's not a system that can be abused, I don't think, but it's one of the rare systems in show business that just seems to work for everybody. And if you've got a signed copy of We Sold Murders This Christmas, I apologize that some of my signatures are not as good as others.
That was in the middle of the existential crisis. So
I do.
That actually, knowing the backstory is kind of involving.
Ingrid came in when I was signing some American copies this summer, and she just looked over my shoulder and said, no. And I went, you're absolutely right. And then I had to, the signature was getting so scrawly that I had to get rid of the 20 previous ones I'd done and start again. You
have to have total silence there, because otherwise you end up writing down the thing that people are saying.
I see it, but I listen. I have podcasts. I'm quite happy with that. Okay. I'll sit and listen to podcasts. I'll listen to, I don't know if you know The Rest is History.
Heard of it, I think.
Yeah. I'll sit and listen to podcasts. But yes, they're lovely things for everybody. Robert Cardwell has a question for Marina. He says, I've just finished Black Doves, which we recommended on Christmas Eve, and they have scenes featuring the entrance of 10 Downing Street. Is there a ready-made set of the entrance out there somewhere which can be hired? It's on all sorts of shows, isn't it, Downing Street?
Yes, it ends up being part of our stories quite often. One of the most popular ones is the Royal Society of Arts, which is actually round the corner from our place in Spotify in John Adams Street where we normally record.
Yeah, we could throw a stone and hit it from here, couldn't
we probably could. We're not there while we're recording this one, but it's actually it's very close. And it's very close to sort of Westminster in general, but it's almost an identical match.
It's the same architect, I think, isn't it? And
yes.
We've done the row of houses.
Yes. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the House of Commons set because there have been so many of those over the years. The only House of Commons set used to be Granada TV, which was one of the regional TV franchises, if you remember from your rival's history lesson. They used to have one, and they built it for First Among Equals, which is one of Geoffrey Archer's many and different novels. And they had it for that. And then it got used for The New Statesman, which was a sitcom about an MP, a Tory MP with Rip Mail.
Yeah.
And then Paul Abbott, the dramatist, bought it because he wanted it for State of Play.
No, really?
Yeah. And then they sort of stored it somewhere. And then it went to Wimbledon Studios. And then Wimbledon Studios shut down and they auctioned it. You could buy the House of Commons, the opening bid on the House of Commons was something like 50p, but I mean, I think it went up further. So I asked Stephen Frears, who is a friend of mine who has made a lot of, the director who's made a lot of things which involve the House of Commons. He says, oh, poor Hugh Grant, that is, for a very English scandal where he played Jeremy Thorpe.
Yeah.
The Commons was built in a barn, but the editor asked for a wider shot, which was obviously unavailable.
Oh, that's funny.
Then they've done other ones on a stage. There used to be a permanent set at Old Oak Common in Acton, where HS2 now finishes. We shot The Deal there, but that's gone. So they constantly sort of build this, but it's quite a big set, that.
Yeah, really big.
Yeah, and so it takes a lot to store. The one in Granada, I think, was like 5,000 square foot, but even when they stored it, like it still needed 2,500 square foot because of the nature of the galleries and things like that. I think they've let people shoot inside the actual House of Commons chamber. Now, there was one with Sean Dooley, and it was about Harold Wilson.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Richard, I don't want a little bit of politics here, but it is empty most of the time.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
You know what I'm saying?
What? Even when it's full, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a bit political. Sorry, guys.
I think Lindsay Hoyle, who was the speaker, they managed to get permission for that because he'd been an MP and had known Wilson, whatever it was. But they are now occasionally allowing it to be used. And I'm not quite sure if you work in the House of Commons and would like to explain the esoterica about how some things are and some things aren't allowed to shoot in there. But as I say, if it's not being used.
Yeah. But yeah, so that John Adams Street one is interesting. I talked to Joe Barton, who wrote Black Doves, not the footballer. And he was saying that the building is identical. It's exactly the same architect, but they had to replace the front door because the front door was different. So they had to bring in their own black front door with the 10 on it. And for Black Doves, they had to put a Christmas tree outside it as well.
The zero, it's with an O on it. It's a 1 and an O. They didn't have a 0 when they were originally putting on the actual number 10.
Is that
so
right?
That's why it's got that very round 0. If you look at the 0 in the 10, it's very round.
Is that right?
Yes, it is.
It's 10.
Yeah, it's hit 10.
10.
Yeah, 10 Downing Street. Not going to catch on, but it.
The most incredible one is the Diplomat, where I think just because of the money they had, pretty much every single location they go to, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the outside of the Ambassador's Winfield House, it's all the real places. It's absolutely incredible. I guess if you throw enough money at it, then people will rent it out to you.
You like, yeah.
Just like politics.
Robert Wisely has one here.
Robert Wisely is a good name.
Yes, it is. I can see that in one of your
One
books.
of the wise men.
He has often wondered how the commentary works for the highlights on Match of the Day. With it being the BBC, I'm not aware of them having the rights to show the full games anywhere apart from the radio, and this is different commentary. Does the commentator do the whole game just for the use of the highlights, or is there somewhere that the full games are shown?
I think it's a question a lot of people ask, actually, because you can watch Match of the Day for years and years and years, and you do think, how are they getting those commentaries together so quickly? And I think people think that people come in and sort of do commentary over the highlights, or you know, and it's not the case. BBC contractually have to provide full commentary on every single Premier League game, and so they do that. So every single game has full commentary, which can be accessed by 5 Live, and the highlights are cut with the commentary as it actually is, which is an incredibly difficult skill.
It is, but if you were just doing it over the highlights, it would sound completely different. You'd be so knowing. Wow, something's happened, but I don't. This isn't going to mean much. You have to do it not as live. It is live.
Yeah, because you would be so tempted to go, I've got to, it looks like he could be, I think he's
Yeah.
going to score in a minute.
Yeah.
I think, there, I said he was. So no, absolutely, it's the pictures are cut, the words are cut, but every single game has a full commentary. It's an incredibly difficult skill, made even more difficult by the fact that they're cutting those packages usually between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. on a Saturday night.
It's
as well.
so skillful.
It's incredibly skillful, but all the pundits watch all the games together with the commentary. So
I've been in that room.
I've been in that room.
Yeah.
We were filming House of Games, and they were doing Match of the Day, and it was the end of our recording day, and I popped up. It was really cool. I just sat there like really quiet in case someone asked me to leave. Yeah, I really liked it.
Have I said this on this podcast before? I think I might have, but the first thing I was ever allowed to write in a national newspaper was when Gary went from Football Focus. He was doing Football Focus at the time. Des Lynam went to ITV, and it was Gary's first day. So I spent the whole day with him, Hanson, and Trevor Brooking in this little black room where they had the 9 feeds.
Wow.
Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating.
That's cool.
They always said, you never see a goal. You're always looking at the wrong telly.
Oh, that's funny. Next year, by the way, we'll get to talk about the replacement strategy for Gary as well.
Absolutely.
Which, and what happens to Match of the Day. I saw loads of comments saying, this is the end of Match of the Day. And you think Match of the Day actually is in really, really robust health.
Yeah.
While ratings are falling everywhere on every terrestrial channel, actually Match of the Day remains exactly where it was, and people love to hate it because sports fans have to have an opinion on everything. But if you are someone desperate for the downfall of Match of the Day, I have bad news for you. It's sticking around for a while.
But we will talk about that because it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, we will. An absolute pleasure.
A joy.
We're going to be talking on
New Year's Eve. We'll be back with you on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, with all sorts of fun things to talk about.
Yes.
See you on New Year's Eve.
See you next Tuesday.